My beloved child. There are moments when the past refuses to remain where everyone placed it. A forgotten sentence returns. A name appears in an old conversation. Someone remembers a detail differently than they were supposed to. And suddenly, a story that seemed settled begins to break apart. That is where this story begins. Not with a reunion. Not with a confession. But with a question your soulmate could no longer ignore. Why had they become so afraid of you when, in the beginning, being near you had felt so natural? They remembered how easily the two of you once talked. They remembered conversations that stretched longer than either of you intended. They remembered how comfortable silence could feel when you were together. Then something changed. Calls became shorter. Messages became cautious. Questions appeared that seemed to come from nowhere. Your soulmate started reacting to things you had never said. Small misunderstandings became strangely serious. Explanations that should have settled things somehow created more suspicion. And eventually, you began feeling as though you were no longer speaking only to the person you cared about. You were speaking against an invisible jury. People whose names you did not know. Conversations you had never heard. Opinions formed in rooms you had never entered. For a long time, you wondered whether you had imagined it. Maybe you had said something wrong. Maybe you had moved too quickly. Maybe you had not communicated clearly enough. Maybe their feelings simply changed. You tried to understand. You tried to explain yourself. Eventually, exhaustion replaced explanation. Because there is only so long a person can defend themselves against accusations nobody will clearly name. So you stopped chasing the answer. Your soulmate did not. Not anymore. It began on an ordinary Sunday evening. Nothing dramatic was supposed to happen. Their family had gathered for dinner, the same dining room they had sat in hundreds of times. Plates were being cleared. Someone was talking about work. A television played quietly from another room. Then your name came up. Not directly. At first, one of their relatives mentioned a place connected to a memory involving you. Your soulmate became quiet. Their mother noticed. Are you still thinking about all that? The question itself was harmless. The tone was not. Your soulmate looked across the table. All what? Their mother hesitated. A fraction of a second. But sometimes a fraction of a second is enough to expose years of certainty. You know, she said. Everything that happened. Your soulmate stared at her. What exactly do you think happened? The room changed. A fork touched a plate. Someone reached for a glass and then seemed to reconsider. Their older cousin, sitting near the end of the table, looked down. That was the first thing your soulmate noticed. Not the answer. The cousin's reaction. Later that night, the memory would bother them more than anything anyone actually said. Because that cousin had once been the person who warned them about you. Years earlier, when your connection was becoming serious, the cousin had pulled them aside. They remembered the conversation clearly. Or at least they thought they did. You need to be careful. Why? I've heard things. What things? Enough to know this could end badly. At the time, your soulmate had pushed for details. The cousin had been vague. They remembered phrases instead of facts. You were complicated. You were not being completely honest. Someone had apparently said you were planning to leave. Someone had claimed you had mocked the relationship privately. Someone else believed you were only interested because you were lonely. None of it had come with names. But it came from family. And your soulmate had been raised to believe that family saw dangers outsiders missed. So suspicion entered quietly. That is how these things often happen, my child. Not through one enormous lie. Through 10 small uncertainties. Enough uncertainty can make even love begin questioning its own memory. That Sunday night, your soulmate went home unable to sleep. Around 1:17 in the morning, their phone lit the dark bedroom as they searched through an old message thread. They were not looking for proof. They told themselves they were only remembering. Then they found something. A conversation from the week everything began falling apart. Your soulmate had written to you. Why didn't you tell me what you said to them? Your answer had been immediate. What are you talking about? At the time, your soulmate had interpreted that response as avoidance. But now they kept reading. You had written. Tell me exactly what you've been told and I'll answer it. Their next message had been cold. I shouldn't have to tell you. Then yours. How am I supposed to explain something when I don't even know what I'm being accused of? Your soulmate stared at that sentence. Years earlier, it had irritated them. Now it sounded completely different. They scrolled farther. Another message appeared. Please call me. There is something I need to explain before you make a decision. Your soulmate remembered waiting for that explanation. They also remembered being told the next morning that you had decided not to explain yourself at all. That memory stopped them. They sat upright. Because suddenly they could not remember hearing that from you. They had heard it from someone else. The cousin. Their stomach tightened. The next afternoon, your soulmate called them. At first, the conversation was casual. Then your soulmate asked. Do you remember when you told me they refused to explain what happened? Silence. Not long. But noticeable. I vaguely remember. You told me they didn't want to talk. I mean, wasn't that what happened? No. Another pause. Your soulmate leaned against the kitchen counter. What did they actually say to you? The cousin sounded uncomfortable now. It was years ago. That isn't what I asked. And then came the sentence that opened the first real crack. I don't remember the exact words. Your soulmate nearly laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because this person had once sounded so certain. Certain enough to influence one of the biggest decisions of their life. Now the certainty had disappeared. What did you mean when you said you'd heard things about them? I was worried about you. From what? They just didn't seem right for you. That isn't an answer. The cousin became defensive. We were trying to protect you. We. One word. Your soulmate heard it instantly. Who's we? Nothing. The conversation ended soon after that. But the question did not. Who's we? For the next several days, your soulmate began remembering things they had ignored. A family barbecue where an aunt became strangely cold toward you after disappearing into the kitchen with their mother. A birthday dinner where your soulmate arrived already upset because someone had told them you were planning to embarrass them. You never did. An evening when you tried to speak privately, but your soulmate's brother kept interrupting until you finally left. And one memory that returned with painful clarity. You standing beside your car after an argument, looking tired rather than angry. You had said, "I don't know what story you're hearing about me, but it isn't the one I'm living." Your soulmate had dismissed it. At the time, it sounded dramatic. Now it sounded like a warning. They needed facts. So they contacted someone they had not spoken to in years. A former family friend named Rachel. Rachel had been present during several of those early gatherings. She had never been especially close to you, which made her useful. Your soulmate did not want someone who would automatically defend either side. They met at a small coffee shop on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. For 20 minutes, they discussed ordinary things. Then your soulmate finally asked, "Did my family ever talk about them when I wasn't around?" Rachel's expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. "Why are you asking?" "Because I'm starting to think I wasn't told everything." Rachel wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "You weren't." The words landed quietly. Your soulmate did not speak. Rachel continued. "I assumed you knew." "Knew what?" "That there were conversations about whether you should keep seeing them." "Who was involved?" "Mostly your mom. Your cousin. Sometimes your brother." Their heartbeat quickened. "What were they saying?" Rachel looked uncomfortable. "They thought the relationship was changing you." "How?" "You were making your own decisions more. Spending less time asking everyone's permission." Your soulmate frowned. "That was the problem?" "For some people, maybe." Rachel hesitated again. But there was something else. This was the midpoint where the entire story turned. Rachel told them there had been a conversation about you shortly before the separation. Someone claimed you had said you wanted your soulmate to choose you over their family. Your soulmate remembered that accusation. It had become one of the reasons they withdrew. They had believed you wanted to isolate them. Did you hear them say that? Rachel shook her head. No. Then who did? Rachel looked toward the window. Your cousin said your mother told them. Your soulmate felt their chest tighten. My mother told my cousin? That was what I understood. And where did my mother hear it? I thought she heard it from you. The entire chain collapsed in one sentence. Nobody seemed to know where the original statement came from. An accusation had traveled through the family until repetition turned it into evidence. But there was more. Rachel remembered something else. One evening, shortly after your biggest argument, you had sent a long message. Not to your soulmate. To their mother. Your soulmate froze. What message? Rachel looked confused. The one explaining everything. I've never seen it. Now Rachel went still. You really didn't know? No. She reached for her phone. I might still have something. Years earlier, Rachel had received a screenshot because your soulmate's mother had asked for her opinion about what to do. Rachel searched through an old cloud backup. Several minutes passed. Then she found it. The screenshot was incomplete, but the first lines were visible. Your name. A timestamp. And your words. I don't want to come between anyone and their family. I need you to understand that. I care about them, and that is exactly why I don't want this misunderstanding to keep growing. Your soulmate stopped breathing for a second. They read it again. And again. That was the opposite of what they had been told. Send that to me. Rachel did. Your soulmate drove home with the phone lying face down on the passenger seat because looking at it felt unbearable. That evening, they confronted their mother. Not angrily at first. They placed the screenshot on the kitchen table. Do you remember this? Their mother looked at it. Her face changed immediately. That reaction answered half the question before she said a word. You sent this to Rachel, your soulmate continued. Yes. Why didn't you send it to me? Their mother sat down. It was complicated. No. Tell me why. I thought you were too emotional at the time. So you decided I shouldn't see it? I was trying to protect you. There it was again. Protection. The word that had explained everything for years while actually explaining nothing. What else was in the message? Their mother looked away. I don't remember. You remembered enough to send it to Rachel. Silence. Your soulmate felt anger rising, but underneath it came something worse. Fear. Because one possibility had begun forming in their mind. What did they say after that part? Their mother stood and walked toward the sink. I don't want to reopen this. I do. This happened years ago. And I made decisions because of what you told me years ago. That was when their mother finally turned around. Her eyes were wet. I was afraid. The anger paused. Not disappeared. Paused. Afraid of what? Losing you. The answer was smaller than expected. And somehow more painful. Their mother explained that during the time you entered your soulmate's life, the family had already been unstable. There had been arguments nobody discussed openly. Financial pressure. A strained marriage. Old resentments. Your soulmate had always been the dependable one. The person who kept showing up. The one who called. The one who mediated. The one who made everybody feel less alone. Then you arrived. Your soulmate began saying no. Creating boundaries. Questioning family expectations. Making plans independently. Their mother interpreted those changes as your influence. Not growth. Influence. Every disagreement became evidence that you were pulling them away. Every boundary became proof. And when rumors appeared, their mother was ready to believe them because they confirmed what she already feared. But where did the story come from? Your soulmate asked. The story that they wanted me to choose them over everyone? Their mother did not answer. That was the missing piece. The one detail nobody wanted to explain. 2 days later, it finally surfaced. Not from the mother. From the brother. Your soulmate had confronted him after realizing he had also been part of the private discussions. At first he denied remembering much. Then your soulmate showed him the screenshot. His shoulders dropped. Okay. What? I know where that story started. Your soulmate said nothing. The brother rubbed his hand across his face. It was me. The room seemed to narrow. You? I misunderstood something they said. What did they say? The brother looked ashamed. Years earlier, he had overheard part of a conversation between you and a friend outside a family gathering. You had been talking about your soulmate's difficulty setting boundaries. You said they shouldn't have to choose between making everyone happy and having a life of their own. The brother had only heard pieces. By the time he repeated it later, the meaning had changed. He told their cousin that you believed your soulmate needed to choose their own life over the family. The cousin told their mother. Their mother, already afraid of losing influence, heard it as confirmation. Then the story grew. Within days, what you actually said became, they want you to choose them over us. Nobody stopped to verify it. But that still did not explain the hidden message. Your soulmate asked the brother. Did Mom tell you they wrote to her? He nodded slowly. What did the rest of it say? He hesitated. Then he opened an old email account. Years earlier, their mother had forwarded your full message to him. She had forgotten that copy existed. There it was. The missing piece. Your complete explanation. You had written that you knew the family was worried. You apologized for moments when frustration made you defensive. You admitted you were not perfect. You explained that you never wanted your soulmate separated from people they loved. You only wanted private problems between the two of you to remain private long enough to be solved honestly. And near the end, you wrote, if they decide they don't want this relationship, I will respect it. But please don't let them walk away believing I asked them to abandon their family. I never said that. I would never ask that. Your soulmate read those lines standing beside their brother's desk. They did not cry immediately. First came anger. Then disbelief. Then the kind of silence that appears when anger becomes too large to express. You all had this? The brother lowered his eyes. Mom did. And nobody gave it to me? I thought she had. You thought. The brother had no answer. That night, your soulmate returned to the old thread between the two of you. For the first time, they read it without the family narrative surrounding it. Your frustration looked different. Your defensiveness looked different. Even your silence after the separation looked different. They had always believed you disappeared because you had been exposed. Now another possibility was staring back at them. Maybe you disappeared because nothing you said was reaching the person it was meant for. They remembered the final message you sent. I care about you, but I can't keep proving myself against conversations I'm not part of. If you ever want to ask me directly what happened, I will answer honestly. Your soulmate had never replied. Now guilt arrived. Not the dramatic guilt of someone who suddenly believes they were innocent and you were perfect. Because that was not true either. You had made mistakes. There had been moments when your temper made things worse. Times when you withdrew instead of explaining. Times when hurt made you sound colder than you felt. But the difference was enormous. Your imperfections had been human. The story built around them had turned those imperfections into intentions you never had. And your soulmate finally understood something that hurt more than any single accusation. They had stopped asking you who you were. They had begun asking everyone else. The confrontation with the family was not explosive. That might surprise you. There was no shouting match where everyone suddenly confessed to being cruel. Reality was more complicated. Their mother cried. The cousin defended their intentions. The brother apologized. Someone said, "We thought we were helping." Someone else said, "You were vulnerable. Your soulmate listened." Then they said something nobody expected. "You didn't protect me from a lie. You protected the lie from being questioned." The room went quiet. Their mother tried to explain again. "We were scared you'd get hurt." I did get hurt. That was the truth none of them could answer. Fear had disguised itself as guidance. Control had disguised itself as concern. Nobody had necessarily gathered around a table and decided to destroy a relationship. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, the damage came from smaller things. Assumptions. Selective retellings. Unverified warnings. A message withheld because someone believed they knew what was best. A frightened parent. A protective cousin. A brother who repeated something he had not fully heard. Then pride. Because once everyone had accepted the story, admitting uncertainty became harder than continuing to believe it. Your soulmate went home carrying the full message you had written years earlier. They read it once more before sleeping. Then they opened your contact. Your name was still there. Their thumb hovered over it. But they did not call. Not yet. Because truth does not automatically give a person the right to return to a life they once misunderstood. And your soulmate knew that. They could not simply appear and say, "My family influenced me," as though that erased their own responsibility. They had chosen not to ask. They had chosen to believe. They had allowed other voices to become louder than yours. That belonged to them. So instead of calling, they began writing. Not a romantic confession. Not a promise. An acknowledgement. They wrote. "I learned something I should have known years ago." Then stopped. Deleted it. Started again. "I found the message you sent to my mother." They stared at those words for a long time. Then added. "I know now that I didn't hear the full truth. I also know that doesn't excuse the way I treated you. I should have asked you directly. I should have listened. If you never want to reopen this, I will respect that. But I needed you to know that I finally understand why you kept saying there was more to the story." They did not send it immediately. Because this was no longer about getting you back. It was about becoming someone capable of facing what really happened. And you, my beloved child, may never recover every year spent wondering why the person you cared about suddenly looked at you differently. No revelation can return the conversations that never happened. No apology can make every wound disappear. And understanding does not require you to reopen a door you fought hard to close. But the truth changes one thing. You were not imagining that invisible wall. There were voices on the other side of it. There were conversations you never heard. There were fears presented as facts. There was a message that should have reached someone and did not. And now, at last, the person who once believed the warning is being forced to examine where that warning came from. Whether they ever speak to you again is a separate question. Whether forgiveness is possible is a separate question. Whether two people can rebuild anything after so much time has passed cannot be promised by a story, a sign, or anyone claiming to know the future. But clarity matters. Because sometimes healing begins long before reconciliation. Sometimes it begins when the lie loses its authority. When someone finally looks backward and realizes the person they blamed was standing outside a story written by people who never asked enough questions. The past cannot be rewritten. But it can finally be read correctly. And sometimes, after years of confusion, that is where the first honest conversation becomes possible. Not because destiny guarantees a reunion, but because the truth has finally entered the room where fear once spoke for everyone else. And this time, no one gets to hide the message.